If you're a facilities manager at a university, you know students rely on the cafeteria for breakfast, lunch, dinner, and the occasional late-night snack. So when a dishwasher breaks down and dirty plates pile up, the mess hall can turn messy in the blink of an eye. Enter Grainger. With over 1 million industrial-grade products and fast delivery, the product you need now is never far away. So you can turn that dishwasher back into a lean, clean washing machine. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Welcome to Paratruth. What's up, everybody? Welcome to Paratruth Reborn. This is a pre-recorded show on 107.7 FM New Orleans and United Public Radio Network. My name is Eric.
And I'm Justin. And we're super excited because this is our first guest after our relaunch of Paratruth. Today we have on Siddharth Ramakrishnan to talk about his book, Neuroscience to Tarot. Siddharth is a neuroscientist, artist, and educator. He is the chair of neuroscience and professor of biology at the University of Puget Sound and a recipient of the prestigious National Science Foundation Career Award. His research spans developmental biology, neuroendocrinology, and neuroethics, a fellow of the UCLA Art Science Center, and his collaborations with artists have led to exhibitions and documentaries that blend the worlds of art and science, highlighting topics like Hox genes, animal unwelts, and biomimicry. He was also a fellow at the Pragmatic Health Ethics Research Unit at Montreal in 2019. He has had exhibits at MOCA Taipei 2013, the New School of Design 2012, Microwave New Media Festival 2011, and Symposium on Human-Dog Coevolution in 2011. An avid tarot reader, he has designed and created the Neuro Tarot deck based on the major arcana of tarot and infused it with neuroscience. He was the keynote speaker at the NWTS 2023 and a panelist at the Masters of Tarot Workshop 2023 with Mary K. Greer at Omega Rhinebeck, New York. Everybody welcome Siddharth. And Sid, you are muted, so you'll have to unmute yourself.
Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me to be on this show.
Absolutely. So first question, as a neuroscientist, what compelled you to combine these two things and write a book about it?
Yeah, I'm a neuroscientist. I've been in the field of neuroscience for about 25 years, and I've also been a tarot reader for about 25 years. So it's always fascinated me what goes on in your head when you start doing these things. And I was looking to find books about it, and I couldn't find it. So I said, okay, let me do the research and kind of dive into it. And it was just fascinating to see all like the literature behind the concept of intuition and neuroforecasting and those kinds of stuff. So which just kind of led me down this rabbit hole into making this book.
Okay.
So there's a big difference, I think, between studying tarot and reading tarot. So what really drove you to want to start reading tarot?
So I was not familiar with tarot when I came here. I was 21 when I moved to the US, and I was more familiar with astrology, having grown up in India. So I was not familiar with tarot, and it was my sister who gave me my first deck of cards, and I think that in times of uncertainty, the fact that, I was a new immigrant, things were like really uncertain, what's going to happen, what's not. You really kind of want to kind of get an insight into what's in store for me? Have I made the right choice? And kind of walking along those kinds of questions. And I think having a tool to kind of figure out what the story is, how the story is going to unfold, to get a sneak peek into what might be happening, was something that was really useful at that point. And then once it started, I think it just was a deep dive into my own intuitive consciousness. So it just became a really exciting tool. And the other fact, the really deep dive happened when around 2018, even before the pandemic, I was kind of going through life where I was kind of just living without intention almost. And it felt like having a card draw every morning and setting an intention saying, I'm going to focus on this and this aspect of life in today. Kind of the tarot kind of helped me like set those intentions and help me like walk through life with more focus.
Mm-hmm.
And that again allowed me to think about, okay, how is this happening and transpiring, and look into that.
Okay.
I think we were all lost in 2020 when the world just kind of shut down. So it is interesting that you used tarot as a way to get through it and interpret what you were going through and how to deal with it.
Yeah, the Voyager tarot deck, I don't know if you're familiar with it, the different systems, but he has this really interesting exercise, almost like you pick a card and then you almost have to say it out loud, your intention. And I did it by just doodling the first thing that came to my head. But he almost says you need to kind of have accountability by telling it to somebody or saying it out loud. And that's what I was using almost as a practice to kind of get into that groove of living with intention almost. Yeah.
Right.
Well, now when it comes to tarot, there's a lot of different aspects or ideas behind how it's used. Some people rely on the supernatural, others think it's just by chance. How does understanding the brain, though, help with tarot itself, or at least how you define the cards that you're pulling?
That's a good question. So I think it goes to my definition of what intuition or intuitive ability is. So the brain takes in a lot of information. We are constantly seeing or feeling a lot of different things around us. And if we are aware of every single little bit of it, we'll probably go completely crazy. And so there's a way for us to subconsciously store all the information and then filter out what is necessary to make like decisions in the moment. And I think that's where a lot of the intuitive ability is coming in, is this subconscious, unaware bits of your brain kind of jumping to conclusions based on that wealth of information that's out there, that's in there almost. And the insight bit as to, okay, how did I come up with this decision, or how did I come up with this particular choice, is something that comes later. So the intuitive decision making is somehow taking in all the information and able to come up with that like quick choice that you need to make in the moment. And I guess in a way we are wired for it, because if you were out in the wild and you heard a loud noise, you need to know immediately what to do and not logically think about, hey, this is what's happening. You need to like on the spur of the moment, like figure out what you want to do. So, and I think that that's kind of what the wiring behind it is. I don't think, at least for the purpose of my research, the tapping into the higher consciousness or tapping into this external energy space and getting those bolts of information which came out of nowhere, I don't think that's what intuition is according to my definition there. That's more of the psychic abilities. That's where you go into that realm, I think.
Okay.
Now, the one thing that I found fascinating in your book is that you have these spots where you have the reader do journaling and interpret, or include the tarot with it. In your opinion, how do the journaling exercises help people with learning tarot and interpreting it?
So I think a lot of tarot readers rely on their intuition, but I don't think they realize that our intuition is not always right. And you kind of have to have almost like a self-reflective practice of going back and seeing, okay, what did I make a right prediction, or did I make a right choice before, or interpretation before, and kind of going back and reflecting on why did I use this particular set of symbols to make that particular deduction is something that it's a really good reflective practice, and that's the only way you're getting better at intuition. So the next time you're faced with similar situations or similar questions, you're able to jump to the right interpretation at that point. And a lot of times we also are relying on inner body sensors that we are not completely aware of, but it's actually giving you those cues. So should I open this door? And if your stomach is clenching and giving you a sense of anxiety and kind of telling you don't open the door, you don't open it. But you might just tell someone, hey, I just felt anxious and I didn't open the door. But it's actually those stomach sensors which are inside you, the interoception, which is telling your brain that there's something bad out there, don't do it, right? So I think we don't notice our body as much, and I'm hoping some of these journaling exercises will allow practitioners to start noticing those little nuance changes that happen in us, so that you become much more good at using all the information that you have in order to make your judgments, I guess.
Okay.
So it's really, what you're saying is it's really just a lot of trial and error until you start to find the pattern that best works for you in that moment or in your life.
And that's what they found scientifically with doctors. Most of this research has been done with athletes and doctors. And they found that novice surgeons, so if you're just training to be a surgeon, you are relying on the Grey's Anatomy book. And you're like, if I cut here, this is where the blood is going to come out. And whereas if you're an expert surgeon who's seen like a bunch of blood coming out all the time, intuitively, like that's where I need to plug it so that it stops bleeding. So unless you go through that training and kind of reflecting back on your practices, you're not going to get to that super expert level. And they found that if you're just in training, you're only using like 2 or 3 parts of your brain to come up with judgments or interpretations. Whereas if you're an expert, you're actually using more than 8 different parts of the brain simultaneously in one combined integrator to make those intuitive leaps of faith. And those are almost like 10 to 15 seconds faster than the logical brain processing that you otherwise rely on. So yeah, the only way is to become like that expert and therefore kind of use that trial and error and kind of go back to that, what happened, why did I do it this way, and so on.
So if I may follow up then with that, say, a lot of people, they don't read their own tarots. They go to somebody else to read. But say you draw a tarot yourself and you interpret it one way, you take it to someone else, they interpret it another. How do you discern what's the right interpretation? Or is that, again, just kind of based on your own feeling and the trial and error aspect?
This is a great question, right? I mean, if you talk to Mary Greer, who's like one of the foremost pioneers in the tarot world, she has this question: how literal do you interpret the cards? So, is it you, or is it is the card? Which meaning are you going to like take away from this particular thing? And I think personally, if anyone who's interpreting is dependent on your current mood, your current emotional state, and all that is going to play a role in how you are interpreting something. And then when you are bringing in another person into it, then you're adding that other layer of do I believe what this person is saying? What am I actually hearing? There's actually a circuit in Frontier which is rejecting hypotheses. So if you see something, even if you see something, you're like, I don't believe this because it doesn't make sense. So you're literally like having this frontoparietal network which is just like shutting down. Like I hear what you're saying, but I don't believe it, right? So that also exists. So it could be that where you're just not willing to listen or believe what is coming out in front of you almost.
Okay.
So this is something I've struggled with for a long time, is using the definitions of the cards compared to just going through the cards. So in your opinion, when you're reading a single card or a spread, is it better to let your brain use its intuition to interpret the cards, or is it better to use the definitions, or do you kind of combine the two?
Yeah. This is again if it's a simple exercise. So if I especially around Thanksgiving, it's a great exercise. If I showed a picture of a table with food on it, right, and if it's just a picture of table with the food, and I put the word comfort next to it, you might then immediately start having pictures of comfort food and warmth and happiness and all that. But if I put a picture of a table with food and I put the word lonely next to it, you might start thinking about how nobody is home for Thanksgiving, and or how this table makes you feel sad and lonely. So I think the words have a lot of power. I guess it's how much steeped in the lore you are. The problem with sometimes is we are so used to looking at a card and immediately jumping to the first interpretation that we are used to, is we forget to notice all the other details which might be in it. So some of the exercises in the book is to kind of retraining your eye to maybe see the things that you've missed. Maybe like just kind of going back to the basics of, okay, what am I looking at, and are there things that are popping out that might be different? This perspective changed in me when I listened to Ellen Lorenzi Prince's talk once, and she talked about this card called the 10 of Cups, which in a lot of Rider-Waite Smith has this couple looking at this rainbow of cups in front of them. And she said, well, you don't know what their faces look like. Maybe they're looking at it and they're looking very sad. So you only see the back. So it was like wow, I never even considered that angle to the whole story.
Right.
So it's really just, it's all open to interpretation, but you have to be careful of what words you're reading if you're following the definition, because they can persuade you in one direction or the other. It could be right or wrong. I know, like when I draw tarot for myself, I will spend probably around about 5 minutes studying the card itself and get a feeling for it, kind of jot down my own thoughts about what it means. And then we'll sometimes refer to the specific definition within the book to see how they interpreted it and see where they kind of match up and what's different between them, and figure out how that best works in my situation. That's something that works for me, which is really nice. But I also know that there's been instances where I have one interpretation and then I read a definition and I'm like, oh God, that's what it means, and I'm like freaking out or something. So it's really interesting. I think that you say that, because I think a lot of people out there they don't always want to take the time to try to understand the cards themselves. And so they leave it open to other people's interpretation, which unfortunately in some cases kind of misleads them and misdirects them when really they should be taking it into their own hands.
You're absolutely right. And I think a simple way to do that would be to just look at, as you just mentioned. I thought your practice was really fascinating. You just open the card and just look at it and write down what you notice. Scientifically, it's been shown that even though you and I look at the same thing, we observe something completely different. And there's a cultural upbringing aspect to it, and also like the individual upbringing aspect to it, where if I show a picture of an aquarium to a bunch of people from East Asia, they tend to say, oh, I saw the pebbles and the bubbles and the water. whereas a lot of Americans would say, I saw the fish with the gold stripes. And so there's even that drastic differences in like how people notice things.
Well, and I think also emotion plays a lot into it as well. For example, and this is probably weird to some people, but the sunset, or like around the golden hour, like when the sun is really low and you get that nice golden hue, a lot of people find that really beautiful. I actually get kind of depressed when I see those colors because the color just affects me in a negative way for some reason. But looking at like a card that has the color black or reds or whatever, they can stir up certain emotions for certain people that again could maybe lead them away from where they should be going, take them down a different path and be a little misleading, which I think also it's important in that case to even have the understanding of like color theory and how colors are defined and how they work. I work in the film world, so we use color a lot to represent emotions and various ideas, within a scene. Blues are cold and often represent sadness. Reds are like for anger or lust. And I think that's something that's very important because there's so much more that goes into reading a card rather than just the symbol itself.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that because roses for me signify funerals.
Okay. Yeah.
And because in India, a lot of times in funerals, you have these big rose garlands on the body. And so from a young age, I've just associated with red roses to be like funereal almost. And even now, like when I smell it, it just is, I just don't get it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, in the context of a different, of a card, what are the interpretation, and especially if I'm reading for someone else, what does it mean for that person is a great question. The emotions is a big thing, is because again, there's a lot of embodied emotion that's going on that we don't realize that we say, I feel anxious or sad or happy, but what is it? It's essentially your body telling your brain, this is how I'm reacting to this situation or the image. And then your brain is then putting a label on it. And being, again, aware of what makes you like shrink up or expand when you're looking at an image, allowing you to feel a particular emotion is something to think about.
Well, and that's another question too, because I mean, there's so many decks out there, and generally they kind of give the same or similar images, but there have been decks that I've seen where it's not even close to a lot of the other decks. And you brought up intuition a lot. So how is interpreting one deck compared to another deck? Is it hard? Is it you just stick to your intuition and the interpretation that you're getting?
I think so. There are some decks I go to for on a regular basis. I also have an old Italian deck with babies being boiled in the background.
Oh no! What could that mean?
I don't normally use, but then I feel like that particular deck is super powerful in terms of its intuitive, in terms of making a story up and evoking those kinds of emotional responses almost. So I think on some level, I think these exercises help you to understand be more body aware or brain aware. But at some point, you just have to let go and let the narrative or the story or the plot of the images just take over and go with it. Because ultimately, that's what we are creating, right? Because when we have a spread or a set of images in front of you, your brain is looking at them and kind of trying to form an overarching theme or a plot device of the hero's journey or whatever it is, like over the set of cards, and how are the images speaking to you in terms of those of that overarching theme. I think that's where you're kind of setting the stage almost.
Okay. So, and this is, I mean, I'm kind of sidetracking a little bit, but when it comes to the various cards that are out there, what do you believe in regards to obtaining a deck? Like, there are people who believe you have to be gifted a deck in order for it to, be meaningful and powerful. Others say you just go and you kind of pick the one that feels like you're being drawn to. Do you have a preference on that, or certain outlook on that?
I've done both. I've been gifted. I pick up decks. When I do readings for other people, I literally hand my deck to other people and ask them to shuffle it. So I have no qualms about other people holding my deck. So I guess over time I've kind of lost those ticks, maybe
Mhm.
that of where to procure your deck and how to handle it. Initially, when I started, I used to sleep with the deck under my pillow to kind of let my dreams like go into it and stuff, but I don't do that anymore. I'm just able to just pick them up and go with it. I did speak to a few other tarot practitioners, and it feels like the field of tarot is kind of moving towards that, where they say that these are just added levels of uh, barriers that people are imposing on themselves, and they just let go of some of them.
Mhm.
Now, this has nothing to do with reading it, but is there a certain card or a deck that you favor, or the imagery, like, is something that's drawn to you compared to others?
My go-to is some kind of a modified Rider-Waite deck, is because that's kind of maybe what I got initially trained on.
Okay.
And then I created my own deck of neuro tarot cards, where I've been using neuroscience imagery to make tarot, based on the major arcana, and I've been using that a lot to kind of think about what aspects of my own um, conditioning I need to reflect on when I'm thinking about these major arcana concepts.
Okay.
So, for example, like the devil is about impulse control, and it's the basal ganglia, which is all about hedonistic impulses and how it's being constantly inhibited. And so, if I get that, then I think about, well, am I feeling like a lack of like certain imbalance in my control levels and stuff like that? So,
Mhm.
Okay.
So how did you go about actually creating your own tarot? Like, did you spend a lot of time just writing in your journal and kind of piecing the parts together that you thought would work best for your cards? Or was part of it also just kind of instinct, like, oh, or even just like art, like, oh, this looks really good here, let's try this and see what happens?
yeah, that's pretty much it. Most of the you can see one there, but I'll maybe I can pull. Like, for example, this is I just talked about the devil, about the impulse,
Mhm.
and I kind of had this little horn-like figure, but that's kind of your third ventricles, and your ventricles look like that inside your brain. I just kind of made it a horn-like kind of over there, just to make it a little bit more that. And then the striations on the left are like the actual striatum, or the basal ganglia, which is there. So trying to see again what symbology can you make something look like the devil, at the same time have some neuroscience parlance. Some of them immediately came to mind, but others, like, you kind of had to work through a few iterations before you came to the right symbology for them.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay. So we've talked about intuition a lot. You talk about it a lot in the book as well, but a lot of people out there will say, no, it's instinct. So can you tell me a little bit about, like, how to tell the difference between instinct and intuition?
So instinct, they say, is really innate. You don't have to learn it. So uh, whereas intuition, even young kids don't. You kind of have to learn it over time. You kind of teach kids to be intuitive starting when they are 4 years old, and they kind of learn it over time. And then you develop it based on past memories, past labels, watching other people, and that's kind of how you develop your intuitive abilities, as opposed to instinct, which is more you don't have to, like, almost like reflexes, where you kind of, if you touch something hot, you step back, or if you feel something hot, you kind of don't touch it. So those kinds of reflexes or instinctual movements are not something that's taught. Whereas intuition, they say, is something you develop as a kid and then you slowly become masters at it.
Okay.
So it's kind of like fight or flight is instinct, where if you're in a situation, it's like, okay, your brain's going to make a decision whether you want it to or not, and you're just going to react. Whereas intuition, there's a bit more depth, a little more thought to the process, right?
There's a more thought, but almost like a blindfolded thought, where you will not. If I asked you why you made the decision, you won't be able to tell me. You'd be like, I did it. I took a left turn and I met my life partner. I don't know why I took the left turn. You won't know why you did it, but then you did it. And then maybe looking back, you'd be like, oh, the signs were all there, but that's something that comes later.
So in that case, instinct or intuition is more like, in a way, it's more like a feeling.
Exactly. That's exactly it. It's almost like it's literally described as a feeling of cognitive ease. Like at that moment in time, you need to make a decision. And when you took that left turn, it gives you this feeling of, yes, I have resolved the situation. I've solved the problem. It might not have been the right solution, but it was the solution at that particular time. It gives you a feeling of cognitive ease. It's what it's called.
Okay.
Now, since you've been doing tarot for 25 years, have you ever had somebody tell you, no, that's not right, that interpretation isn't right, you need to reshuffle this deck and do it again?
Yeah, I've had it. And even if sometimes the same cards will pop out, or they'll kind of come out during your shuffling, and sometimes a different set will come out, but then it'll still kind of point to the same narrative on some level. And what I've again heard is ask the querent to kind of talk about, what do you see in the cards? Like, what do these images tell you? And then let them talk about it in their own words in order to kind of break through that barrier if they're not able to like process what you're saying. And it's almost a fight between your default mode network, which is kind of your sense of self, and your the other circuits, which is trying to kind of listen to the other. So almost like your empathy network versus your self network kind of fighting with each other to kind of figure out, am I going to listen to this person or not, almost.
The way you describe it, it almost sounds like, in a way, it's kind of like therapy in that moment. Because, if you have someone who's arguing with you and they're saying, no, it's this, but then you're having them use inner reflection to tell you what they think and what they believe, and then help them interpret it that way, then they're kind of, you're leading them very much in a way like a therapist would. You're trying to get them to understand your views so that it'll help, I guess, better, how do I say this? Help them better understand the path that they need to take.
Yeah, I think that the phrase that a lot of therapists use is called transactional psychology. The idea is, you and I are having this transaction now, and I'm taking in all the information about how you look and your body language and all that stuff, and then using other my own past experiences with people who've talked this way or spoken this way or asked these questions to then interpret a certain thing. And the same thing is going on in a tarot reading, right? I mean, you are relying on associations and metaphors and things that have come before in order to make a particular interpretation. So, yeah.
Well, and then in that case, have you ever been in a situation where you draw a card for somebody, or someone draws one themselves, and you kind of have an indifference or a fight within as to what the interpretation is? Like just a small battle where intuition is saying, oh, it could be this, but it could be that. And then if that's the case, like, how do you discern what the right interpretation is on your part?
I think I've had it a few times where I've had people who want a particular, you can kind of palpably feel that they want a particular outcome from a reading. And when I lay out the cards, you don't see it. And and you want it to be different, and you're sometimes forcing it to be something that it should not be. Like for example, I had a friend who lost her life partner of many years, kind of talking a lot about when is this kind of cycle ending almost. And it just felt like the cards were talking more about withdrawing inwards and like a more of a period of isolation as opposed to a breakthrough coming very quickly. And I struggled, and I don't think I gave her the right answer at that point. It was like my body was telling me, like that sinking feeling in your stomach was telling me that the isolatory period was there, but uh, but the cards were not maybe pointing to the same thing. So
Right.
yeah.
So you really have to battle in those cases, especially with close friends or even relatives. You have to battle the difference of what is showing up on the cards versus your own personal emotions in the situation,
Yeah.
and whether or not you're going to hurt them.
Yeah, definitely.
That's really tough, right? For sure.
I've had a couple of tarot readers though tell me that they deal the death card, and they don't say to somebody, you're going to die, or somebody's close to you is going to die, because although it might be the case, death in tarot does not necessarily mean death in the physical. And it's one of those things where I think probably every tarot card reader struggles with it, not just interpreting the cards, but how to phrase the information where the person's not going to get really upset, or also tell them, hey, look, this is what I'm reading, but consult your physician, or consult your psychiatrist, or, because a lot of people will take it literally and take it like it's a medical diagnosis.
Yeah, I in 2019, I went, no, 2019 or early 2020 probably, I went to a psychic, a medium, and she was pulling my cards, and when it came to my my life partner, she got the Three of Hearts, three of swords, which is this in the Rider-Waite-Smith deck. It's this heart which is being pierced by three swords. Which immediately, like, I'm like, heartbreak, kind of thing,
Right.
and but she had this, she didn't even have a beat, and which kind of helped me, because if she had had a beat, I would have been like, okay, she's like thinking how to make this sound better. But it was like, she said, if you pull those swords out, the heart is going to bleed out. But the swords are in, there's no blood coming out. So which means that, she says, it's a relationship, there's like a lot of push pull and things, but there is that love is there. And it was like a really fascinating read of that card to me. And it just completely changed the perspective of that card going forward almost.
Okay.
That's really cool. Now, when it comes to, let's say someone comes to you for any, what doesn't even matter. Someone comes to you for a specific situation. You read their card. Have you had it where like people will come back and be like, okay, well, best 2 out of 3. Let's see if it changes. And do the cards ever change, or does it kind of seem consistent? Or for yourself too? Like, I know when I first started like delving into tarot myself, I would pull a card, and at the time, then I wasn't really studying it. I was just reading the definition. And so I'd read the definition and be like, I don't like that. Let's put it back in. Same question, pull a different card, and you get something else most of the time. But how does that work? Like in that kind of situation, or even when you're discerning like a single card draw versus a 3 card or 5 card spread?
Yeah, I've had the first time I did this was, I had a friend who's a mathematician who said, let's do this and see how the probabilities work, right? And weirdly, we got the same, like I did the thing 3 times, and we got the same. I shuffled and everything, and I got the same set of cards for his drawings.
Wow.
And then he said, I want to do it again. I said, no, you know what? Now my cards are saying, no, don't push it. Don't push it. I'm not going to do it again. So that's happened. And then the other synchronicity that sometimes happens is, especially when I'm reading for someone like my sister, we always get the Queen of, I think it's a Queen of Wands. It's a one of the cards where there's a cat also with the figure in the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, and either the Queen of Pentacles or the Queen of Wands for her. So which is always like her signifier almost, like every time I do that. And so some of the signifier cards come up when I do readings. Recently, when I've been going to conferences, they actually literally say, if you have a card that you identify with a particular person, pull that out, put it out there, and then do the spread around it almost. So you don't have to wait for the signifier to pop out, like put it out there, and then like do the spread around it. So I think there is a probabilistic element to it, of course. And then a lot of the tarot cards have some of them can have similar meanings, depending on how you interpret it. So that's also there. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know how much you push the limits of spirit on this.
Right. Yeah, unfortunately, you always have that probability factor in there too. So it's hard. It's hard, and I've had the same problems myself. Like, okay, I've drawn the same card 4 times, and then in the 5th time it doesn't come up. So it's interesting. A lot of people do want to try reading tarot, and they go to get the deck and they start reading through the definitions of the card, and they start to get discouraged because it's kind of a memorization game over just drawing and interpreting it yourself. So what type of advice could you give somebody who is just starting and wanting to do this, but they're getting overwhelmed just because the definitions in the book are just ridiculously overwhelming?
I would say, first of all, pick a deck where you feel there's enough imagery for you to go on. Like nowadays, there are all these super minimalistic decks where you just have one line or like a hexagram or something, and it's so difficult to even like get any image out of it. So I would say, first of all, pick a deck which is rich in imagery, so that you don't have to kind of dive into the book almost like as an immediate thing. And then the only other thing I would just say is just practice. I would say, just it's okay to read for yourself, pull a card, then maybe just pull one card a day and then delve into it for that particular day, as opposed to doing like going into a 3-card spread immediately. So just get familiar with the cards, and because the meanings I would also initially not do the reverses. I would just stick with the straight ones before you delve into the reverses and symbology and all that stuff.
Yep.
So I still don't do reverse reading. I if I get a reverse card, I just like flip it up. I don't really care about the reverse meanings.
Okay.
So I would just say start simple, and then once you get used to a particular technique, just stick with it instead of like adding more and more stuff onto it.
Okay.
So I want to actually jump back to what we were just previously talking about regarding the signifier card, because I know, like, considering the various cards within the arcana, some of them, like the devil or death, can be a little sketchy. And when that appears over and over and over again, how do you use that as a signifier? Like, is that always a negative meaning, or, can there be a positive outlook? And does the signifier ever change if the person who it's attached to starts to change themselves?
I think the signifier does change, definitely. I mean, as you're going through life, the signifier changes. For a few years, my signifier was the Hanged Man, like almost like a contemplative, doubting, but also as someone who's looking at things from a different perspective. And then at some point it's changed. It's no longer the Hanged Man, and I've had my signifier change over time. And then the other question you were asking was the devil and and death. Yeah, the death card I don't have as much of an issue with, because again, it's all about you need to have cycles end in order for new cycles to begin. Almost like it always has to happen that way. I think people usually have more problems with the tower or the devil, as you just mentioned. And I think the if you think about you can think about the devil in a couple of different senses if you want. I mean, some people think about controlling over your physical needs as opposed to, your mental prowess is some way you can think about it. You can also I got a devil in a reading recently for a lady, and I was talking about how she's in too much control and she actually needs to kind of let loose and let her inner devil out in order for her to experience life almost. And then the whole of last year, I kept getting the 10 of swords. Every single reading, I was getting the 10 of swords. I was traveling across the country and I was getting the 10 of swords everywhere. And I'm like, what's going on? And then I really looked deep into. I was just looking at the picture of this guy lying with the swords coming in, and then a lot of people were talking about how anything that could have been done to this person is done. Now it's time to move on and just like go to move on. For me, I actually took it differently. I was thinking about how a lot of times we experience things in life without being emotionally invested in it. And I almost thought that the Ten of Swords was pointing me towards almost experiencing each joy and happiness, like each prick, almost feeling it and really experiencing and saying, yes, I feel this, I'm grateful for this experience almost. And so I think there's always a way to look at the cards if you really notice the images.
Okay.
So now, one of the last questions I have actually, as a neuroscientist, and maybe just as a tarot reader in general, you read for yourself, you read for other people, but how do you? I mean, I know you hand people the cards, and I'm sure sometimes you deal them yourself. How do you really know for sure that the cards you're dealing are for them and not for you, or vice versa?
Sometimes it's very evident. How it's evident is interesting. So one of the exercises I talk in the book is you take a deck and you split it into 3, and then you choose one. But before you pick that choose one, why are you choosing that particular order? 1, 1, 2, 3? Like, is there a tingling in your fingers? Is there like a release in your heart? Is there like what is it that's drawing you to that? And then if you forcibly move your fingers away from that pile and move to a different pile, do you feel tension? Do you feel that you cannot physically, like, unless you have a first force, can you not move to the different pile? So think about what's causing that. And that might point towards kind of give you an answer as to whether a particular thing is for you or for them or something like that.
Okay.
The other thing is the intention. I really think at the point of shuffling, if my mind starts wandering and I am thinking more about myself and my own, like, problems and stuff, that is something that's a big red flag for me,
Okay.
which means I kind of need to go back to a practice of grounding myself before I start the whole thing again. Yeah.
Okay. So it really comes down to, again, intuition, and then just examining your own energy and where you're placing it.
Yeah. I
Okay.
think that's absolutely right. Yeah.
Do you have a particular spread that you usually use?
Yeah, my go-to is usually just a 3 card. I do just a simple 3 cards, and I used to do a past, present, future kind of a thing, but then recently it's been more of an overarching narrative is kind of how I've been using it. And then the other thing I've been doing further than that is a 3-2-1, almost like a pyramid, an inverted pyramid.
Okay.
So I do the 3 cards, and for extra information, I do a 2 and a 1, and then kind of do a story around that. So those are what I've been using very commonly.
Okay.
I don't do the Celtic cross as much as other people do. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. That used to be my favorite. I've kind of done more of just a single card or a 3-card spread now over the Celtic cross, because there's sometimes just way too much information to interpret and use your intuition to guide you. So that's kind of what I was curious about, because it's a lot of people use the Celtic cross, and to each their own. So it's interesting that you do the kind of similar that I do now. Something you bring up in the book is the mind's eye, and you talk about, looking at, I think it was the 3 of Wands, and, interpreting it, using your intuition to understand what the card is telling you. And then, taking the card away, and you're still seeing the card in your mind, but it's sometimes, you bring this up in the book too, that, people see it vividly. And sometimes people just kind of see bits and pieces, maybe some of the color, not all the color. How do you use that in your tarot practice to kind of interpret the cards and use your intuition to give the reading better?
Yeah, this visualization aspect is very different. I mean, everybody has a different skill associated with it. You were talking about the sunset, Eric, earlier, about how you normally it's not as wonderful as other people describe it. For me, if you ask me to close my eyes and visualize a sunset, I sometimes only see a cartoon, like those little hills with the sun poking out, as opposed to a picturesque one. So I think it's as simple as if I ask you to close your eyes, and or if the card is evoking a memory in you, what kind of memories are you evoking? Is it immediately because even though the picture might be the 3 of Wands or whatever card is in front of you, your mind is not just settling on that image. It's automatically, like, they're now shuffling through all kinds of stuff in your head. Maybe there's a voyage. So with the minute the word voyage comes in, then you might think of like a ship or an airplane or something. So immediately you're like filtering through various images in your head. And that's kind of where the mind's eye is coming in, is we are kind of sifting through these images in order to kind of land on which one is kind of most appropriate for this particular situation. And first of all, it's fascinating that we all have the capability of doing that. And then the other thing is, each of us is going to have a different level of ability in terms of, some of us, it looks like, can see landscapes better. Some of us can see motion better. Some people can see figures and people better. So from the same card, your mental imagery of what you're noticing in that can be like completely different. But I always use the Fool card, and some people notice the guy, and some people notice a little dog in it, and some people notice, like, that he's going to jump off, and others say like the wind is blowing. So all kinds of things come up. So it's really fascinating how that ties into what your interpretation is going to be. So part of the exercise is, okay, this is what you do for your first interpretation. Like, go back and look at it the next day, and you're not supposed to look at the mountains or the trees. Like, look at something else and see if your mental imagery or your mind's eye view of it changes. So almost forcing yourself to change what you're looking at almost.
Okay. One final question here, because we are starting to run out of time. But this is this is a little debate that Justin and I have had over the years. And it's really, I just want your opinion on it. What is your take on digital tarot readings, like through a phone app that just automatically, you open it up and it gives you a card? Like, is that something that you think is simply randomized? Can you put energy into that to get the right card? Or I don't know. Like that's something I always tell. Like originally I used to use them, and then I was like, I'm switching to the regular tarot. It just feels better to me. It feels like it's
funny you bring
more
this up because I was
connected.
going to ask him about it too. So.
Okay. See, so we're trying to settle the debate now.
Are you talking about like Astro Guru on Yahoo or something like that?
Well, I use an app called the Golden Tarot, and you can do it like a single card draw, or you can have the app draw cards for you. I've usually used it just for like getting the definitions for the cards if I'm doing a physical deck. But for a long time, I was doing a single card draw and letting the app choose it for me.
I think it works on some levels. I think there's a certain depth it lacks, but I think it works on just the images. I think it definitely works. Because I was as a part of this book exercise, I was trying to not use tarot at all, imagery at all, but just do intuitive guesses based on random image generator. So I would just put it out there and say, okay, what do these 3 images like mean for me? And I really got the imagery bit of it. What I didn't get was the visceral sensation. Like when I talked about splitting the cards and like, where is your thing drawn? I found that I was missing the visceral bits of it. Because I feel like a lot of the reading is dependent upon your body as well as your mind. And I think you might be getting some of the mind's eye view of things, but not the entire story, maybe. I don't know.
Okay. No, that makes a lot of sense. Well, it is about that time to end the show. So we wanted to give you a chance to tell everybody where they can find you, find the book. The mic's all yours.
Oh, thank you. I'm Siddharth, and you can email me if you want at neurotarot@gmail.com. My website is www.brainmystic. That's BRAINMYSTIC.com. And that's where you can find my Neuro Tarot deck. The book, The Neuroscience of Tarot, is available at Llewellyn, but also on Amazon or other places. And then you can see me speak at the StarCon in Florida on January 26th. I'm the Sunday keynote at StarCon in 2025. So that's my next main assignment. So
awesome. All right, Siddharth, thank you for being on Paratruth Reborn.
Thank you so much. Thanks for the invite, and there's really engaging conversation. It was a lot of fun. Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you.
All right, folks, make sure you check out Neuroscience to Tarot. It was an amazing read, so I highly recommend it for anybody who is interested in getting into tarot and kind of understanding that it's more about your own intuition and interpretation over, just reading through the definitions. Next week, we've got Tim Reborn on to talk about the scary book of Christmas lore. And then that runs us right into our Christmas
Crazy
New Year's episode.
It all moves so fast.
It does. It really does. But yeah, we got a lot of great stuff coming for you. If you have been listening and enjoying on 107.7 FM in New Orleans or on UPRN, share the love, share, like, and subscribe, no matter where you're listening or watching, of course. And we love to hear from you as well. So make sure you're commenting, telling us your views. You can email us at paratruthradio@gmail.com. Yes, I know the show is Paratruth Reborn. We just didn't change the email. But yeah, until next week, where you will find us same time, same channel. My name is Justin.
And I'm Eric. Peace.